Hello there, this is Chris West again, and I'm going to walk you through my K2 unit. I'm really excited to talk to you about this specific droid because he was my first one that I did. You may have seen my other video where I did R2. You can click above to be able to watch that one if you want. This was a similar droid in a similar amount of time frame. It only took me 10 days to do that, so I'm going to walk you through what I did with this guy in order to get him printed in 10 days. I'll walk you through my spreadsheets so you can see all my costs involved. I'll walk you through some of the files in Bamboo Studio so you can see that as well. And I'm going to take you on a walkthrough across this droid. You can learn a few things that I learned in order to get this guy printed as fast as possible. So hopefully you can have a great project as well. All of the files came from Droid Division, so I will link those below so you can see exactly how you can build one yourself. We're going to start off with the whole body. So you can see here, this K-2SO is big. Full scale, he is 7 feet tall. So I'm 6'1", reaching up here to the top of his head. That shows you how big he is. Overall, this is a very large droid. And some of the things that I really like about it is he is freestanding. Look at that. He's down here on the ground, standing with no supports. He is so well balanced here that this makes him incredibly easy. Unlike my other little droid there in the corner that has 3 legs to stand on, we've got 2 right here for this to work. Everything about him is just awesome. You've got all of this that is fully articulating. So you've got his elbows, you've got his shoulders up here that move as well, and they move out too. It's not just moving up and down. So it does that on both of them. His torso does move a little bit, you'll see right here, but not a whole lot. And his head, I've actually taped it in place so it doesn't move, but you can move this a little bit. I'll get more about those things here in a little bit. But this quick overview of his scale, you can see how large he is, that his fingers completely move. Got him holding Ezra's 3rd lightsaber right here. But the whole thing moves really easily, and you can transport him with ease too. His head's gonna come off right here at the neck. His torso lifts off, and I'll show you what that looks like later. And then down at the bottom here, I technically have it cut here, but I usually transport from the hips down pretty easily. And I'll show you what that looks like as I break this down and look at everything. But let's just start here looking at the head, and we'll move on down the body. This was the very first part that I put together. I've got these files before I did anything else, and actually it makes it really easy to display because it comes with a display that looks really similar to this and allows you to be able to put it on a shelf with ease. It does move a little bit. I don't have it to do that. I actually glued it in place so it wouldn't move anymore, but I can pull it off really easily. You can see here, it just latches down really easily. It's got the hole here, so if you were to add any electronics for lights later on, you can do that. One thing I'll point off right from the get-go is the top of the head. It's terrible. It really does not look very good. Orientation-wise, it was the best that I could do. It was printing like this in order for it to go up. This was the best orientation with the minimal amount of supports for me to work through. If I was to do this again, I would split it. I would split it just like this and get better orientation, not worry about it from there. Easy to finish, easy to reprint if I wanted to do that, but again, he's 7 feet tall. Who's gonna see this? No one's gonna see it. So you're seeing it now, but at the same point, it's not really the point of this project. You can see it comes off really easily, so I can put in any lights. I've got some white irises that I put in here that are 3D printed. Some people have used milk cartons that they cut out. Still, it's fairly transparent, where if I wanted to put lights behind this, it'd work well. And we've got holes down here in order to put in electronics with batteries. All of these parts were printed separately and glued together very easily. This, again, was the first thing I did, is I thought it was the coolest part, and I wanted to do this first before I got into the body and built it up. I wanted to see how this would work out. Pretty solid piece. This is all one piece here. Again, I glued this down here on the neck so it wouldn't move around, but you can leave it there. I've seen some people that have made these fully articulating so the head does move. That is not something I was wanting to do at all. I like to build static droids, and you can too. Transitioning further down the droid, we're gonna look at the chest. Now, I'm gonna take this off here in a minute so you can see on the inside, but let's look around the outside. I printed all of these on Prusa and Bamboo printers, meaning I've got a 256 cubed bed, so I actually had to split the files a little bit further, and I'll show you how to do that when I get down into the files, but these were not able to be printed on a single part. So I had to take the upper and the lower chest pieces and split them into 4 pieces. So overall, I could not get them all to fit the way I needed to. So you can see the seams back here for the upper and the lower. I've also got this access port. I chose to glue it shut. A lot of people will leave this open so they can access any electronics. I chose not to do that. I left that there and glued it because, again, static droids are what I like to do. I'm not going to do anything else from that point. The only other color you're going to see on this droid is going to be right here in this gold. I did that with a simple color swap at layer height. I'll show you that again once I get into the files, but that was it. All the rest is going to be black. And when I get into different files and filaments I use, you'll see why I chose to do it this way. A few other parts to glue on here. Really, it's not that difficult. They snap together so easily, and they've got so many different guides, it works well. I've got shoulder pistons in here that I glued in place, and then the shoulder covers, these actually slide off if I wanted to, so I can get in there and I can access these bolts if I wanted to tighten it up or not. I keep it fairly loose because I'm not positioning him. I find that if I move his arms at too much of an angle, he gets a little unbalanced. Not terribly, but I get a little worried. Being this tall, I want to make sure he's balanced well. So at this height, this works quite well to be able to make sure I just leave it as is. But these bolts here make it very easy to work with. I'll have the exact cutouts of prices of all of the bolts and where I got them here in my in the description, as well as another part in the video. But this is a pretty easy one. He does rotate on a dowel, which I'll show you here in just a second. Okay, we are now looking inside the chest cavity. So what we see right here is I've got a wood dowel. This was something that was recommended. Wood was the best thing that I found to use at Home Depot. Easy to cut, exactly what you needed. It worked quite well. Some people use metal rods. Wood dowel fit perfectly. That's just a 1-inch dowel right there. You'll see up here, that hole right there, that's where the main dowel going through the whole body is so that this guy can rotate and move his chest left and right. I'll show you what that looks like once I get down to the lower torso, but nonetheless, you can see on here, I've got bolts in here. This is for the shoulder pieces in order to keep those in place so that I can move it around. And then this is just for added stability. It's not really necessary. I chose to do it anyway, but I think you can get away with not putting in that 1-inch dowel in order to support the shoulders. Some people are worried that it's gonna bend a little bit here. I'm not really worried about that. It is very tight in there, especially with these bolts. I've got bolts on either side of these things that hold it in place. And you can see here, we got good strength. These things are not gonna crank on you. I suppose if you were gonna put in any electronics and motors, this wood dowel would be necessary. But overall, you're gonna be okay. And the way that these things are glued together means it's gonna stay in place really easily, especially with the accelerant that I use. This is gonna hold tight and not move very well. Okay, we're looking here at the torso or the belly down below the chest. This part here was really easily printed. In fact, this comes off really easily. Normally that's gonna stay. This wood dowel here, this is what goes down through the entire thing. I'll get back to the torso in just a second, look at that belly, but I wanted to show you this. This comes off with no glue. So this 1-inch thing goes all the way down here, and this is where that sits. That's what then went all the way up into the shoulders and held up right underneath the head. So the whole chest piece and the chest piece and the shoulders are all supported by this 1-inch dowel going right down here. Again, this lends to its perfect stability because put right here in this location, he does not move. We've got some added support here into the hips. Once we get into the hips, I'll explain some of this, but this means this is gonna be super, super strong. What I did with a lot of these things is only 2 walls. Some of them I did go to 3, maybe even 4, but overall, 2 walls is sufficient when you are just using something as a static droid. Anything beyond that, you don't really need to worry about that. Now down in the feet, I did go a little further and did do some thicker walls, but overall, most of this is done with 2 walls. Coming back down here to the torso, you'll see that this part is printed in 3 pieces. I've got the front part right here, and then the 2 sides in the back. These were kind of my most exciting ones, just because it's got a lot of detail and they're really easy to print. And when it came together, all of a sudden you had the belly done, just with 3 pieces. They're all printed in this orientation. Down here, I should say there's a 4th piece right here, as this one just slid right into place with a dovetail, and I glued that in place. But I really like this piece. This was a strong one. This is one that does not need any load bearing, doesn't need a lot of infill at all, because nothing rests on this at all. Everything is done through that hole on the dowel. This can be as thin and light as you want because nothing is supporting it, is just sitting on top of the hips, and that's all you have to do with it. All right, let's move on over to the hips here. Everything here going down makes it really easy to be able to support this. I should mention, when I built this, I'm showing you in reverse, but I'm actually built it and printed it separately. I started down at the feet and moved my way up. Made it a lot easier to assemble it going that direction. Otherwise, you're gonna have pieces laying around everywhere. I've got more pistons just like in the shoulder. These are just for show. These pistons, like in the shoulder, they don't support anything. All of the weight is gonna be down here on this joint. And they slide right in place. Because it's all glued, I can't take it apart and show it to you, but it slides right in here into this hip piece and holds in place. And is not going to move. I added some glue, it's gonna stay, but for a while, I didn't even have the glue in there and it just rested in place. A lot of these things, especially in the joints, you don't have to glue them because it's just so well balanced. It works incredibly well. So because of that, what you're able to do is be able to hold this up really, really well and you have no problems. Now I will notate right down here, I have had this fall over. Not the whole thing, it was a part, it was not put together yet, and it did get bumped and it fell. The other problem I had is as I was trying to put this together, this is a two-person job when you're putting this together for the first time. Trying to get things balanced on the legs to put everything in place, something's going to fall. So let someone hold it while you slide everything in place, or you will get that. Now, I didn't worry about it too much because, hey, he's a static droid. He looks a little rough around the edges. That's how a lot of these droids look. I'm okay with that scuff right there. One of the other things that you'll notate here on the hips is the print orientation. That's something I would definitely change all over again, knowing that where these pieces were going to be displayed. You can see here, adaptive layer height would have helped, sure, but print orientation would fix it. Just look at this right here, these parts here, compared to this one down here, and you can tell I should have just changed the orientation. Coming to the back here, I have that down here at the bottom, and that's okay there. And down underneath, it's really, really smooth. So some things you have to give in order to be able to make sure you can print it right, but that's something I would definitely change just because it is, for me, quite evident right here at the front. If it was all like this, it'd be fine, but I have multiple parts that don't look like that. So check your print orientation. That's something that you might be able to change for some of these forward-facing parts. Okay, I've taken apart the legs. What we have here are your hips and the upper thighs. These are purposefully not glued together. Makes it a lot easier to transport if I want to be able to take this apart into different pieces. So I can take this apart and it slides in place with these plastic dowels as well as the wood dowel to give it strength. Now I've got the left leg over here. You can see because the R is reversed, that's what you're dealing with. That's something you have to keep in mind. There are no right or left files. They are going to be all right unless you mirror them. If you see something that has an R on it, it must be mirrored. So I've got this knee right here. You can, if you have the other one in place that is not mirrored, then you're gonna have two knees, which they look very similar, but as you put these in place with the dowels, they're not going to be matched up. If you have the rest of the leg that is the left orientation or the right orientation, it's not gonna match up. I messed that up on a couple parts. So my 3MF files make it very easy to be able to put in place and work from there. The other thing you'll notice here is this wood dowel. This is the longest wood dowel. It starts up here in the legs and it goes up part way. You can see it quite significant here at this distance here. I would say about 1.5 feet. It goes down through the knee and it goes through the leg down all the way to the ankle, which I'll show you a little bit later. This is the longest piece. This is the one that needed the most strength. Wood dowels were my favorite. They're really cheap, just a few bucks at Home Depot in order for you to put this all together. Now, one thing I might do eventually is paint this, you know, just a little bit of black paint in there just to make sure it's a little better visibility. But overall, what we're looking at here, people are not gonna be looking inside those holes and looking at that. They're gonna be marveling at the 7-foot droid that you have in your living room, like I do. That's the cool thing. These little imperfections that you have on all this aren't so bad. The paint job and whatnot could be improved, but again, you're dealing with a 7-foot droid that people are just incredibly impressed with. Lastly, let's look at the feet. And I say last, yet as I pointed out before, these were the first things that I printed. It's much easier if you start off with your toes and you start off with your feet and your heels and your ankles, because then you can assemble this so much easier. So start with the feet first and move up from there. If you go with the head down, it's gonna be sitting on the floor and not gonna be able to put this together. Now you can see just like I had up in the knees, you've got this wood dowel that came all the way down. So the wood dowel moves from the upper thighs all the way down here into the feet. Perfect fit. That 1-inch dowel works well with wood. You can use metal if you need to, but I think it's going to make it heavier than you have to do. This makes it really easy to be able to put in place. All of this part here is glued together. So all of these parts here are all just going to be set in one piece, and it's incredibly balanced. This was the biggest surprise of how easily it worked. Now, it is recommended to use a mannequin stand, and underneath you can be able to drill in to be able to put in a mannequin stand, but I haven't found the need. This is so well balanced that both of these feet work really, really well going up the ankles and into the lower legs here. This makes it so that they hold in place, they're really strong, and they do not move at all. So start with the feet, glue those things together, and move on up the droid from there. All right, before we head on over to the computer and look at all these files, let's look at all the parts taken apart here. So we can see I've got all of these parts here. Breaks down really easily for you to access everything. So I've got 2 legs. I've got the hips right up here, 3 pieces. I've got the belly. I've got the chest, which was the biggest part overall, with the arms. So those pieces just right there, 5 pieces. Then you've got the head in 2 pieces. 7 pieces for a 7-foot droid. Now, all of these wood dowels do come out here. So if I needed to access that or change it, I could do that. I did not glue those in place. If I ever needed to reprint a piece, you don't want to glue that in there. And then this piece right here, this is for the main torso that heads up from the hips all the way up into the shoulders from there. And then of course the head. So all of these pieces just slide in place. So when I take this to a show, I can take it apart like this. Oftentimes I don't need to even go that far. I can leave the legs attached completely up to the hips, but it might be different for your car and your transportation needs. But this is how I have it all set apart. It makes it really easy to transport, and you can do that too. I'm going to cover some of the tools that I use specifically when it comes to gluing. Your standard flat edge snips are amazing. Love these things. I use them all the time. Glue is very, very important. I glued everything together. This is Glue Masters. I buy in large quantities. This is 16 ounces right here. This 16 ounces medium viscosity, that works quite well for me. I buy it in large quantities because I have such large projects, but it tends to work better that way, is what I found. That if when you have a large thing like this, price per ounce or price per gram, it's the cheaper. Glue Masters is the best for that. The other thing I learned for this project specifically was this bonding adhesive. I buy X-Fix. It comes with glue as well, but I don't really use their glue. It doesn't really last very long anyway. It's a small bottle. But you spray this on one side, and you put glue on the other side, and when you put those 2 pieces together, within seconds, it is doing it. It says bonds within seconds. I promise you that is correct. Make sure your pieces fit, do your dry check before you use this, and then make sure you have the right orientation right before you glue it together, because you're not getting those parts apart. So some of these things will hold in place without glue, some of them need it. The other thing I have here is I was able to transition to using small bottles like this with small nozzles. This one, I didn't actually use it for this project. I mainly did use the big bottle because I'm working with such large pieces, but it is nice to get these small bottles to be able to use that small thing. The only problem is these nozzles clog pretty easily, so can't always give it a full guarantee that that'll work, but primarily use this adhesive, use this Glue Masters. You're going to do really well be able to put this all together and make sure that everything stays in place. Let me give you a breakdown of all of the costs that went into building this droid. Similarly to my R2-D2, looking at all of this, I'm able to give a breakdown of all the different projects, plates, parts, etc. in order to figure out how much it cost. So I'll give some comparison to R2, what we're looking at. You can see I had 8 different project files, so 3MF files in Bamboo Studio that used over 14,000 grams, or in other words, about 14 spools worth of filament. When I look at all my average cost of filament, which is $15.53, that's about $218.89 for just the filament itself. Now, when we look over here, we can see a breakdown of all the costs. I use Matter Hackers for my Silk Gold and White and Sunlube Black off of Amazon in order to get these prices. Now, these prices here are bulk prices. That's how I'm able to get them so low, as I buy a lot of filament for my projects here. And it's also to take a note, these are not weighted averages. So obviously use over 99% of the filament is black, yet it's not reflected here. So the 1553, it's just average all of these costs. So it's not weighted. Chances are, because that's a cheaper filament, this is going to be a cheaper cost, closer to $200. But that's okay. When we look at our hardware here, I have basically 3 different hardwares that I've got. I've got my cap bolts that I used for the joints, and I've got my wood dowels that I used as well from Home Depot. So 1 inch by 48 inch, I bought 3 of those, spent $22.94. All in all, I spent $60 on hardware. Some of this hardware you might already have. So as I look this all together, my total cost for the whole project, $279.12. Pretty cool. Pretty great that you can print a droid that's 7 feet tall for less than $300. Now, how long did this take me? You can see how long each different part was going to take. Now, I had 134 parts across 78 plates. So if you had one printer printing 24 hours a day, as soon as one ended, you hit start on the next one, it would take you a total of 13 days, 4 hours, and 35 minutes. Okay, that's how long it would take you if you went straight on one printer back to back to back. That's going to be fairly difficult to do. You can see some of these are 3-day prints if you were to do that for all of the legs here. Some of them are going to be multiple hours. That's why I have 10 printers. I'm able to do this across 10 printers and do this very quickly. So overall, I'm able to take this 13 days and whittle it down. I did it in about 10 days, took some breaks in there, wasn't going straight the whole time. And that's kind of a healthier way to do things, even though you have multiple machines. So here's how my breakdown is. Let me know what questions you have with the breakdown on the amount of filament that I used, the hardware I used, and the filament I used. I'll show you that here in just a second, where I got that on the separate websites. But overall, this gives you a breakdown how I was able to get this to be under $300 to print the whole thing. One other thing to note, this does not account for the actual cost of the files themselves. So I'll show you that in the links here in just the next part of the video. Now I want to show you where I got everything, all the links, everything you need to use. All of this is going to be found linked below so you can see everything that I have and where I got it, and you can purchase them accordingly. First thing, you got to buy the files. Droid Division, fantastic files, fantastic help in order to be able to work through all of this. So you can see this is the first thing I got off of Etsy. Everything sold here by Dave through Droid Division. You can grab, you can work with. It's all personal use though. You cannot sell these files. You cannot sell the final product. He does have a method you can work out if you do want to sell this final thing to somebody else. Contact Dave in order to work that out. So you can see here $20 for the head. It's also going to include the stand that you see on here. And I'll show you that once I get in my files and how they're all broken down 3MF, what that looks like. Very easy breakdown. It lets you know exactly where these things go. It's pretty easy to follow so that you can put this all together. Also on the body, it's surprising, only $8 more, and you get the entire body. The head's not included, so you do have to buy that separately. So if I added that into my cost, then we're looking here at another $48 on top of my $279, which obviously pushed this over $300. But nonetheless, that's a great deal considering what you're getting. There's some fantastic files to work with. So if you have any questions on this, Dave is a great resource, and there's a great community on Facebook in order to get in and talk about Droid Division files. Now, all the files that I got for filament and whatnot, jumping over here to Amazon, I buy a lot of Sunlu Black. Buy this in bulk, so I'm able to get this down to a great price overall. $14.24 is what I spend on this one as I buy it in bulk. In the past, you have been able to buy directly from Sunlu at an even cheaper price, all the way down to $10 per kilo. Fantastic deal, considering the filament is perfect, and I've never had issues with that. But they haven't run that deal in a while. So I'm buying off of Amazon. Yes, it's more expensive, but at $14.24, it's still cheaper than anywhere else I've found for good quality filament. Now, the Matter Hackers, I buy directly from Matter Hackers, Silk Gold. It's free shipping. The more you buy, the cheaper it gets. So if you're buying just the gold, it's $24.99. You're buying just the white, we're looking at the same price here. But I buy it in bulk, and you can see here the more that you buy, the cheaper it gets as you get lower and lower and lower. That's actually silky white, now that I think about it. But I've got over here regular white. And we can see that gets down to $20.87, and the cheaper you get on that one, the cheaper it gets as well. So that's how I'm able to get this price down, is I buy a lot of these in bulk, keep in my workshop to work through everything. Now the hardware itself, I mentioned I bought a dowel from Home Depot. You can just go there and get a 1-inch dowel. I don't have that pulled up here to look at, but they've got a lot of wood dowels you can pick up there. And then the pieces that I bought are going to look like this. I spent $37.29 on hardware directly from Amazon in order to get sent over to me here. So what we've got here are primarily a lot of these bolts. I'll open up a couple of these for you to look at. These furniture bolts are fantastic because you've got these different caps that you're working with, so you're able to screw it in on one side and tighten it off. Way better than using nuts and bolts because you're just able to tighten them from both ends. And if you're working with joints, you're going to want to be able to have loose on one end or the other in order to get this out. So all M6 pieces. I got some extra pieces as well that I had to buy in order to have enough. Everything's going to be found in the instructions. Really easy instructions to follow. Not a lot to worry about as far as that goes. The instructions here are easy to get through. They're easy to help understand with a huge community. Not going to go through this just because these are files that I purchased, so I'm not going to go through all of this line by line, but it gives you a great idea of what you need to do, what these are going to be, and what order you need to print them in. All of this stuff, of course, you're going to get here from Droid Division. Purchase these files. You're going to get the instructions. Makes it very easy to be able to assemble from that point. Thankfully, on this project, file management is really easy to work with. So all the files that you get here and you get downloaded, they're very easily organized, very easy to find. Unlike some other Droid project I've worked on that have so many renditions and so many options, and it's hard to know what to work with, you're not going to run into that with these Droid Division files. So with the head here, you can see everything you need to have. It's very easy to be able to look through, and it's got all the different parts that you might need to print. Some of these are optional, so you don't have to use them. And then as we look through all of these, you've got everything you need. You've even got some parts that are already done and split. So if you have a smaller printer like me with 256 cube on a Bamboo or Prusa, you can fit that. You can use that in a larger one if you want to do it on one piece. He's got all of those parts if you wish to do so. Very nice to be able to work through this. The only thing to be aware of is everything is in one orientation. So here we can see these files here that all say right. You're going to need left ones too. You need left ankles and feet and knees, so you have to mirror those. Now my 3MF files already have that done, and so I'll show you what that looks like here, and so you're able to understand how I've already done that and how I color-coded that. But as far as the files go, it's really easy to go through all this, and it's got everything you need in order to find this for normal size printers as well as smaller printers. It's got everything you need. It really didn't take much time for me to go through all this, figure out what I needed to print. Now I do, of course, have my 3MF files. My 3MF files make it very easy to be able to go through all of this because all of these files here mean that you can just click on it and you can open it right up. So it's very easy to be able to get in and have your file management and get to the files that you need in order to understand what you're working with. Let's look at how I was able to slice a few of these files. Starting off on the head, you can see where everything comes in. Most of my files are going to be separated on these build plates, so you can separate them and make it easier to print with different print settings and be able to make sure that there are no failures when you have a lot of things on the plate. So you can see all the different things I've got here, all one color just because it's easier. I like green because it really stands out, and I can put things from there. You can see there are some supported files that are already in there, so you can put those in there and just use that. I have a few other orientations. This one right here is the orientation that I used when I 3D printed K2 previously. Not my favorite one, as you saw before, just there's a lot of artifacts here on the top of the head. Again, not too worried about it because it's just the top and I'm not using this a whole lot. From the top end, he's 7 feet tall, what to worry about. But there are other things that you can do, and so there are other options you can try by putting this a different direction, maybe even slicing it, cutting it in half completely, and printing it differently. Whatever you want to do, there's a few different ways to go about this. You decide. I got just a few different options, different ways you want to do this, and what you want to do. Now, there are other things, of course, other files that are very easy to work with. And they don't require a lot of supports. Some require more, some require a lot less, some require none. There's a few different things you can do there. There's also, of course, the stand on here that's just for this particular head. So if you wanted to do that, you could print that and you could just display the head, which is what I did for some time before I got around to doing the whole body itself. Looking at a few other things that I've got on here, for example, the legs. All of my files are really set to be really easy to print. I say my files, they're Droid Division files, but the 3MF files that I'm using here, they're already pre-supported and they're color coordinated. So here, all the green, one leg. The red is another leg. So they're already mirrored accordingly. You can see how some of these are mirrored, how they look a little different. Some of them don't really matter, others do. And the fact that you're dealing with legs, you really want to make sure those things are right because the way that it's perfectly balanced. I did mess up on some of these ankles and knees before. I had the wrong one, and I had those rectified thereafter. So even some of the details are on here, you're going to want to be one versus the other. So it's important to have those things done accordingly so you can make sure that you're printing the right files the right direction. Some of the other ones that I have split up, I took the hands, for example, for easier printing. I used this in such a way that made it a lot easier to be able to slice and then print and then assemble. So you can see here, again, color coordinated left versus right. And you can see I was able to take a normal finger and I cut it here in the slicer and use some pins so that they go together and makes it very easy to assemble with some glue and some accelerator as well. So pretty easy to be able to put those things together. I did take some liberty to split those a little bit further. Also split up the chest a little bit further as well, so that I could work through all of this and have a little bit faster prints. That was a big thing for me. Less supports. I don't care about the seams. I'm not finishing this. I don't care about the seams and what it's going to look like here. Everyone is just excited to see a 7-foot tall droid in my living room. Seams don't matter as much. Maybe it does for you. Get a bigger printer and you're likely to have a chest all on one part. This is why I was able to have to split these all up in order to make sure I had different parts here. So I had 9 prints. Some of them here I cut a little further so I did not have any supports. Some of them do have supports. You can see some of these have some pretty significant overhangs. If I was to do this again, I probably would cut this once more in order to put this together. You do have some potential issues depending on where you cut this, just because you do not want to cut things where strength is built into this, like these holes right here. I did do that on the lower chest part. Didn't have any issues, but that is something to be concerned about. Circles are strong. When you cut them in half, you diminish the amount of strength you're going to have. So it's up to you. Do you want to use these 3MF files that make it easier to print with everything pre-supported, the way that I printed them, the way that you had the same results that I did, or do you want to change things a little bit? Remember I mentioned one other thing I would do differently is change the orientation. I don't recall which parts they were. I'd have to go back in here to look at this specifically, but nonetheless, what I had here is orientation that I would probably change just so I have it all the same striations, specifically on the front of the chest, so it looks smoother that way. I don't care much about finishing, but, you know, print lines don't mean a big deal, but when they're opposite against the grain, that seems kind of funky. So I would change that part. That's something you might want to do as well. One other thing to point out, everything I did was in 3 millimeters. So, 0.3 millimeters layer height. That's what I worked with overall. Everything was done on a 0.4 nozzle. Strength-wise, everything was done at 10%. Everything's only done here with 2 walls. The exception to that rule was going to be, let me find the files here. They were going to be the feet that I worked with, as well as the legs. I think the legs. Yeah, it was the legs that I have right here. So I do have some of these files here that are going to have 4 walls. Versus you see the hip here, only 2, but I've got this one right here. This is an ankle. This is a knee. I put in 4 walls. So the part that is going to be a little bit more load-bearing, I made a little bit stronger. Necessary? I don't know. That was just a caution that I made, but everything is still only going to be 10% infill or 15% on some of them. Kind of varies just depending on what I had saved it as at the time, but 10-15%, it doesn't matter. 2 walls, that works for me. 4, even stronger, and I did that just on the joints, the knees and the ankles. Did I do it on the feet? No, didn't do it on the feet either. But so it's up to you what you want to do. So these files here, I'm working with Dave to get those loaded. If I do get those loaded into things, you'll be able to see that in his files. I'm not going to link them. I'm not going to share them because these are not my files to share. They are Dave's over at Droid Division. If you purchase his files, you may see my 3MF files in there. They work specifically with Bamboo Studio, but that doesn't mean you can't load them in Prusa Slicer, as they support those 3MF files too, so you can print them on a Prusa printer. I can't guarantee it'll work with other slicers, but I do know it works with Bamboo Studio and Prusa Slicer as well if you wanted to load these files and use my print settings so that you can get similar results as me. Well, there's K-2SO. Hopefully you're able to learn a few things. He's been an awesome project for me. Again, he was the first large project I ever did. First one. That means you can do it too. These files are easy to work with. He makes a great addition to my droid collection down here. Quite honestly, I think they make a better duo than R2 and that weird gold guy. I think K2 is the better droid to have around. Really easy to work with. Similar costs overall to my R2 unit. My R2 unit, if you want to watch the build, you can click that in the description. Be able to see how I did that in 10 days as well. Similar costs. Both similar costs. I was able to build that. R2 was about $350 overall. Also took me about 10 days. This guy, you can have an awesome droid and have him garden your living room for just over $300. That's a pretty awesome price. Hop into it. Let me know what questions you have. I'm happy to help you with. Let me know what droid I should do next, or rather, let me know which droid I need to convince my wife that I need to build as well.